Tokyo never really sleeps. Its lights blink like 1,000 unblinking eyes. Alleys breathe out the day's heat and secrets. And somewhere in the lattice of apartment blocks and narrow streets, a piano is practicing the same passage again and again. The melody threads the night like a whisper, like a question left unanswered. That was the first thing Yumi remembered, a melody she didn't know but felt she had always known. She would come to call it the recital piece, though by the time she named it, the music had already taken root inside the city, inside her dreams, and inside the story that would haunt everyone who heard it. It began in Tokyo with 3 girls, 1 stage, and a shadow that learned to dance. In an old building in Ikebukuro, the Asagiri Ballet Studio trained young dancers for the spring showcase. The studio smelled of resin and raincoats, the air thick with effort and dreams. The mirrors lining the walls were merciless. They reflected not only posture, but ambition, pride, and fear. Aiko was the kind of dancer who never seemed tired until she stopped moving. Her bun was always neat, her toes always taped, and her notebook filled with scribbled corrections. She wasn't perfect, but she was relentless, and that determination made her radiant. Rina, on the other hand, was born graceful. Every movement flowed through her like water, her lines long, and her leaps light. The other students adored her. She had that easy charm, but admiration has limits. When someone else outshone her, her smile froze just a little too long. Yumi was the quiet one, who existed in the spaces between. She passed water bottles, tied stray ribbons, and laughed easily. She wasn't the best or the worst. She was simply kind, the thread that kept everyone together. One rainy afternoon, Madame Asagiri gathered the class and announced the lead for the showcase's main ballet, a haunting reimagining of an old waltz. The music was slow, ghostly, and beautiful, twisting in ways that left goosebumps. Aiko Madam said, "You will dance the lead." The words hung in the air like incense smoke. The studio froze for a heartbeat before the clapping began. Rina's applause came a fraction too late, her smile a fraction too bright. Yumi caught that hesitation, the flicker of disbelief in Rina's eyes, but said nothing. The rehearsal that followed was grueling. Madame Asagiri pushed Aiko harder than ever. Pirouettes until her feet burned arabesques, until her breath came ragged. But Aiko never complained. She believed this was her moment, the one she had worked years for. Rina danced perfectly too, but beneath the precision was frustration. Every correction to Aiko was an invisible wound to her own pride. Yumi tried to ease the tension, but jealousy has its own rhythm, quiet and patient. The night before the final rehearsal, rain swept across the city in silver sheets. Aiko stayed late to practice alone in the mirrored room. Her reflection multiplied 12 Aikos, spinning endlessly, her white leotard glowing under the cold fluorescent light. She danced until her muscles trembled, until her reflection seemed to move a fraction slower than she did. At last, she packed her bag, threw on her raincoat, and headed home. The streets were slick and empty, the sound of tires whispering over puddles. She crossed at the light near the station, her earbuds still playing the recital music. She didn't notice the delivery truck turning too fast, its headlights cutting through the rain like blades. There was a screech, a crash, a flash of white and red. The truck driver said later that she seemed to vanish under the wheel before he could even hit the brakes. When they found her, she was still wearing her white ballet leotard soaked in crimson. The next day, the studio was silent. No music, no laughter, only whispers and swollen eyes. Yumi couldn't stop shaking. Rina stood apart, her face unreadable. That evening, Madame Asagiri announced they would still perform. The show must go on, she said softly, and a new lead would be chosen. Everyone knew who it would be. Rina bowed her head, pretending to mourn, but inside something like satisfaction bloomed. She told herself it wasn't her fault. Life goes on. But as she rehearsed the lead role, she couldn't escape a strange feeling that someone was watching. The mirrors seemed colder. The floorboards creaked even when no one moved. The music, Aiko's music, sometimes played out of rhythm, as if another dancer's footsteps echoed behind her own. The recital came flawless. Rina danced beautifully. The audience rose to their feet. And for a few hours, she was a star. That night, exhausted and proud, she returned to her small apartment. She turned off the lights and collapsed onto her bed, smiling in the dark. But then she heard it, the music. The same waltz from the performance, faint, distant, like it was leaking through the walls. She opened her eyes. The room was still. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to move. Panic surged. Her eyes darted around. She could only move them. Sleep paralysis, she thought desperately. It's just that. But then from the far corner of the room, something began to move. A shadow, slow, swaying, spinning. A figure emerged from the darkness, dancing soundlessly to the waltz. The air grew cold. The shape drew closer, and Rina's breath caught in her throat. It was Aiko. Her leotard was no longer white, but deep red, drenched in blood. The right side of her body was shredded bones, glinting faintly through torn flesh. Her face, half beautiful, half ruin. Yet she danced gracefully, her movements, exact every turn, perfect, like she had never died. Rina tried to scream, but no sound came out. Aiko stopped in front of her, tilting her head slightly, eyes glistening with tears. Or was it blood? Her lips parted, and in a trembling whisper she said, "Give it to me. Your right arm, your right leg, your right eye." Rina's mind spiraled. The words repeated over and over in rhythm with the music. She tried to resist, but the whisper drilled into her skull. The pain began before she understood. A sharp, searing agony tore through her right side, burning, twisting, devouring. She screamed silently. Then everything went black. Her parents woke to her cries. They found her thrashing her sheets, soaked in blood. The doctors couldn't explain the injuries. Her right arm and leg were crushed beyond repair. Her right eye lacerated. She survived, but only half of her did. When she woke, she refused to speak, staring blankly ahead. Weeks passed before she uttered a word. When Yumi visited, Rina finally told her everything, the dream, the ghost, the demand. Yumi tried to comfort her, but her voice shook. deep down she felt something cold, watching from the corner of the hospital room. That night Yumi couldn't sleep. The waltz hummed faintly in her head. She told herself it was imagination, stress, grief. But when she opened her eyes, the room was darker than it should have been. The sound was real now, echoing softly, growing louder. She couldn't move. Her heart raced as a dim red light began to pulse at the edge of her vision. A shadow twisted in rhythm to the music, closer, clearer. The blood-stained dancer spun into view. It was Aiko again. Her right side mangled, her eyes glistening with despair. Yumi wanted to cry, to run, but she could only watch. Aiko bent low, whispering, "Your right arm, your right leg, your right eye." Her voice cracked, pleading now, as if pain rather than vengeance drove her. Yumi trembled but remembered Rina's fate. Somewhere inside her paralysis, a spark of reason whispered back, "If Aiko wants the right side, give her the left. Maybe the curse is literal. Maybe it can be tricked." Summoning all her strength, Yumi shouted in her mind again and again, "Take my left side, take my left side." The air shuddered. Aiko froze, confusion distorting her face. Her left eye flickered, rage and sorrow blending. She let out a sound like a sob and vanished. The room fell silent. When Yumi woke, sunlight filtered through her curtains. She touched her face, her arms. Everything was there. She laughed shakily, tears spilling. She thought it was over. But curses are never satisfied with cleverness. That afternoon, Yumi went to visit Rina at the hospital again. Rina's father greeted her at the door. Her mother wasn't there. He said she had gone home to rest after a long night. Something in his voice trembled. Yumi's stomach knotted. She excused herself and ran to Rina's house. The front door was locked, but through the back window she could see the curtains drawn tight. She pressed her face to the glass and gasped. On the bed lay Rina's mother, motionless, her sheets soaked dark red. The right side of her body was gone, her eye, her arm, her leg, all missing, as if carved away by invisible hands. Yumi screamed for help, but by the time the ambulance came, it was too late. The police searched for explanations: break-in, animal attack, self-inflicted wounds. Nothing fit. No prints, no forced entry, no weapon. Just blood and silence. The incident was quietly filed away as unexplained trauma. But stories have a way of leaking through cracks. Students whispered, teachers muttered. Someone told a friend who told another, until eventually it reached you, just as it reached me. They say that anyone who hears the story of the red ballerina will sooner or later hear the music in their dreams. It starts faintly, a waltz with missing notes. You'll wake thinking it's nothing. But if you ever find yourself unable to move, if the room feels colder than it should, listen carefully. If you hear soft footsteps, slow and measured, if a figure begins to spin in the dark, wearing red and whispering, your right arm, your right leg, your right eye, whatever you do, don't say yes. Because once you do, she'll take them. And once she does, she'll dance again.